Millionaire CEO heard his maid's daughter crying over a broken toy. His action shocked the household. The cry was small, fragile, and almost drowned by the hum of the towering office, but it cut through the silence like a crack in glass. In the penthouse of one of New York's most powerful corporate buildings, a sound of pure heartbreak echoed from a corner no one important ever looked at. A millionaire CEO, a man feared in boardrooms and admired on magazine covers, froze mid-step when he heard it. That single broken cry, coming from a maid's daughter clutching a shattered toy, would quietly unravel everything he believed about success, power, and what truly mattered in life. If you believe that kindness can change destinies, that second chances exist even in the coldest places, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to this channel for more stories that touch the soul. Ethan Caldwell had built his empire on discipline and distance. At 42, he was the youngest CEO to ever lead Caldwell and Pierce Holdings, a real estate and technology conglomerate that dominated skylines across the United States. His office sat high above Manhattan, glass walls overlooking a city that never slowed down, much like him. Ethan's days were measured in meetings, profits, and precision. People described him as controlled, intimidating, and emotionally unreachable. Very few knew that he had once been a scared boy from Ohio who lost his parents in a car accident and learned early that emotions were luxuries he could not afford. The household staff at Ethan's penthouse followed strict rules. They worked silently, efficiently, and invisibly. Among them was Grace Miller, a quiet woman in her early 30s who cleaned the office floors every evening after business hours. Grace was a single mother who had moved to New York chasing survival, not dreams. Her husband had passed away during military service, leaving her with a small daughter and a mountain of bills. Her daughter, Lily, was 5 years old, with soft blonde hair and eyes that carried far more sadness than a child's should. Grace had no choice but to bring Lily with her to work sometimes, especially when childcare fell through. Lily would usually sit quietly in a corner with a small wooden doll that had once belonged to her grandmother. That evening, the city outside was painted in shades of gray as rain slid down the windows like tears. Ethan had stayed late, reviewing reports long after his executives had left. His mind was elsewhere, burdened by a deal that had brought him millions but left him feeling strangely hollow. As he stood to leave his office, adjusting the expensive watch on his wrist, the sound reached him. It was not loud, but it was raw, the kind of crying that came from deep confusion and loss. It stopped him cold. He followed the sound without fully understanding why. Near the corner of the executive lounge, he saw Lily sitting on the floor, her small shoulders shaking. In her hands was the wooden doll, split cleanly in half. One arm dangled uselessly, and the painted smile seemed painfully ironic. Grace stood nearby, panic written across her face, torn between comforting her daughter and the fear of being seen where she was not supposed to be. Ethan had seen children before, plenty of them at charity galas and fundraising events. But this was different. This was not a polished moment for cameras. This was a child experiencing real loss, one that felt enormous to her small world. He noticed how Lily clutched the broken doll as if it were something alive, something she had failed to protect. The sound of her crying stirred something uncomfortable inside him, a memory he had buried for decades. He remembered standing in a hospital hallway, clutching his mother's cracked wristwatch after the accident, feeling like his world had split in two just like that toy. Grace quickly tried to usher Lily away, apologizing profusely, her voice trembling with fear of losing her job. But Ethan raised a hand, silencing her without a word. His face, usually unreadable, softened almost imperceptibly. He knelt down in front of Lily, his expensive suit creasing against the polished floor, an image no one in the company would ever believe if they saw it. Lily looked up at him with tear-streaked cheeks, eyes wide and frightened. She did not know who he was, only that he was a tall stranger with serious eyes. Ethan did not speak, but his gaze rested on the broken doll. He gently took it from her small hands, examining it as if it were something precious. In that moment, the entire household seemed to hold its breath. What Ethan did next shocked everyone. He did not dismiss the child or call security. Instead, he stood up, told Grace she could take the rest of the night off, and instructed his assistant to cancel his remaining meetings. He left the building that night carrying the broken doll in his hands, something no one could have predicted. Grace watched him leave, stunned and terrified, unsure whether this act of compassion was real or the beginning of something terrible. The next morning, the penthouse buzzed with quiet speculation. Staff whispered behind closed doors. Grace arrived early, her heart pounding, expecting to be fired. Lily stayed close to her, the absence of her doll still heavy in her small hands. Hours passed with no word. Then, just before noon, Ethan called Grace into his office. She entered shaking, eyes lowered. Ethan stood by the window, the city stretching endlessly behind him. He turned and handed Lily a small box wrapped in simple brown paper. Inside was the same wooden doll, but it was no longer broken. It had been repaired with care, the cracks smoothed and painted over with gold, inspired by an old Japanese art Ethan had researched overnight. The doll looked stronger, more beautiful than before, its imperfections transformed into something meaningful. But that was not all. Ethan had commissioned a custom toy set for Lily, handmade by a local artisan, along with a letter explaining that broken things were not worthless, and sometimes they became more special after being mended. Lily's crying turned into quiet wonder as she hugged the doll tightly, something shifting inside her that words could not express. Grace broke down in tears. Years of exhaustion, fear, and loneliness poured out of her. Ethan listened without interruption, something he rarely did with anyone. He learned about her husband, her struggles, and the nights she went hungry so Lily could eat. For the first time in years, Ethan felt the weight of his success not as a shield, but as a responsibility. From that day forward, things changed. Ethan arranged flexible hours for Grace and helped secure reliable childcare. He quietly paid for Lily's education fund and medical insurance. But he did not stop there. The experience awakened something dormant inside him. He began walking through his own building differently, noticing the people he had once ignored. He started initiatives for employee families, scholarships for children of low-income workers, and mental health programs that valued people over profit. The household noticed the transformation first. The cold silence that once defined the penthouse softened. Ethan smiled more, listened more, and worked less into the night. He began mentoring young employees, sharing his failures instead of hiding behind success. And sometimes, late in the evening, Lily would sit in the corner with her repaired doll, drawing pictures while Grace cleaned, and Ethan would glance over, feeling something close to peace. Years later, when Ethan stood on a stage receiving an award for corporate humanitarian leadership, he did not talk about profits or growth. He spoke about a broken toy, a child's tears, and the moment he realized that wealth meant nothing if it did not heal what was broken. The audience applauded, but Ethan's eyes searched the crowd until he found Grace and Lily, now older, smiling proudly. Just before we reach the end, take a moment to comment below and tell us what this story reminded you of, or who it made you think about. Your words might inspire someone else who needs hope today. As the lights dimmed and the applause faded, Ethan knew his life had been divided into two parts, before the cry, and after it. A single act of compassion had not only changed a household, but had rebuilt a man who once believed his heart was beyond repair. Lily grew up knowing that kindness could come from unexpected places, and Grace learned that dignity and hope could exist even in the hardest seasons. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that small acts of kindness can change lives, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps keep these stories alive, and together, we can spread a little more light in a world that desperately needs it. The applause eventually faded, but the moment stayed suspended in Ethan Caldwell's chest long after the lights dimmed and the audience dispersed. Standing backstage, holding the weight of recognition he never chased, he felt an unfamiliar emotion settle in, gratitude mixed with humility. For the first time in his life, an award did not feel like proof of success, but a reminder of responsibility. His eyes met Grace's from across the room, and in that quiet exchange, no words were needed. Both of them knew that night years ago had altered the course of their lives forever. Life inside the Caldwell penthouse no longer felt like a polished museum of wealth. It had become something warmer, more human. Ethan began returning home earlier, no longer burying himself in endless reports and late-night negotiations. The city outside his windows still pulsed with ambition, but inside, there was now laughter, conversation, and an unspoken understanding that money alone could not fill empty spaces. Lily, once the silent child in the corner, grew into a bright, curious presence. She asked questions, left drawings on Ethan's desk, and talked endlessly about school, books, and the future she now believed she was allowed to dream about. Grace's life transformed in ways she never thought possible. With stability came confidence. She enrolled in evening classes, something she had postponed for years out of fear and exhaustion. Slowly, she worked toward a degree in early childhood education, inspired by the struggles she and Lily had endured. Ethan never announced his support publicly, but he made sure she had time, resources, and encouragement. He understood now that empowerment meant more than charity, it meant opening doors and stepping back so others could walk through them on their own. But change, even positive change, is never without resistance. Inside the company, some executives whispered about Ethan's shift in priorities. Profits were still strong, but his focus on people unsettled those who thrived on numbers alone. Shareholders questioned his investments in employee welfare programs. Board meetings grew tense. Ethan listened patiently, but he no longer bent under pressure. He had learned something invaluable from a broken toy, that cracks did not weaken something, they revealed where healing was needed. One winter evening, a heavy snowstorm blanketed the city, muting its usual chaos. Ethan found Lily sitting near the window, her repaired wooden doll resting beside her. She was older now, her face softer, her eyes brighter. She asked him why he helped people when he didn't have to. The question caught him off guard, not because it was difficult, but because the answer was deeply personal. He explained, gently and honestly, that once he had been broken too, and someone had helped him without asking for anything in return. Lily listened carefully, absorbing the lesson in a way only a child could. That night, Ethan realized that his legacy was no longer his company, it was the lives he touched quietly, without cameras or applause. As years passed, Caldwell and Pierce Holdings became known not just for towering buildings, but for its culture of compassion. Stories spread of employees whose lives were changed by unexpected support, of families lifted during moments of crisis, of opportunities created where none had existed before. Ethan never positioned himself as a savior. He often said that the smallest moments carried the greatest power, and he meant it. He knew that if he had ignored that cry years ago, everything would have remained the same, and something vital inside him would have stayed lost. Grace graduated with honors, Lily sitting proudly in the front row, clutching the same wooden doll now worn from years of love. Ethan attended quietly, sitting in the back, watching with a sense of fulfillment no business deal had ever given him. Grace went on to open a small learning center for children from struggling families, a place filled with warmth, patience, and second chances. Ethan helped fund it anonymously, refusing recognition. He wanted the center to stand on its own, built on purpose, not his name. One afternoon, long after Lily had grown into a confident teenager with dreams of becoming a writer, she handed Ethan a folded piece of paper. It was a story she had written about a man who listened when no one else did. About a child who cried over something broken. About how kindness changed everything. Ethan read it slowly, his vision blurring. In that moment, he understood that the ripple of one compassionate act could stretch farther than any empire. Before this story ends, if it moved you, if it reminded you that even the smallest kindness can rewrite a future, please comment below and share what moment touched you the most. Your voice matters more than you know. Ethan Caldwell never forgot the sound of that cry. It followed him, not as a burden, but as a guide. It reminded him that power meant nothing without empathy, and success was hollow without humanity. The broken toy was still there, sitting on a shelf in his office, not as a decoration, but as a promise, to always listen, to always kneel down, and to never walk past someone's pain again. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Stories like these live on through you, and together, we can remind the world that kindness still has the power to change everything.